One thing I did want to point out is, I don't know if you noticed on the total expenses, last year our budget for the shelter was $166,000. That's how much it cost on our end for what we did to run the facility, with between salaries of employees and the medical that we provided for the animals.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Tom had a question for you, too.
Yes.
Are you able to tell me if the Chihuahua that came in today was their owner found?
Yes, she came in immediately at 1 o'clock. She was very upset. Her pet sitter didn't even tell her that the animal went missing.
Oh my gosh.
So she did give the shelter a donation, and then took her dog immediately to the
good.
veterinarian to address the issue of the owie on her neck.
Oh, she was shivering in one of our sheds this morning.
Yeah,
She was found.
and I'm surprised, made it down Polk, because the lady lives on E Street.
Wow.
So she made it down Polk without getting hit, which is
That's
surprising.
really far.
But yeah, that was
Chihuahua.
a pretty.
Actually, it was like 2 miles.
It's
for
a pretty
Chihuahua.
nice abscess that she had on her
Oh,
neck. So
gosh,
yeah,
well-
I have a feeling that woman is not going to be using that pet sitter
That was
anymore.
a scared little dog.
Yeah,
Good,
no,
I'm
yeah,
glad
no,
that-
everything's
that
great
worked
with
out.
that. So
Good.
Well, this is
Thanks.
quite an appropriate report, having watched the National Dog Show on Thanksgiving and watched the rerun before last.
who needs football, right?
Dog shows much more.
Walter has a question.
A question for the chief first, and Laura, you may want to follow up.
Okay.
Chief, if I saw your slide correctly, it was $2,700 in license fees? In
That's-
dog licenses.
Dog licensing.
Is that, and we charge $35 to $25 for a license,
Yeah, fixed and
fixed and unfixed?
unfixed.
Is that gross, or does the city keep some part of that? The city collects that, correct?
Yes, that's gross.
And does all of that flow through to the Humane Society?
It comes to the general fund back into the budget.
But that means that we were licensing around 75 to 100 dogs a year?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Door knocking the election this year, I saw that many, or heard them in one block.
Well, we do have a reserve program if you want to volunteer for that.
I can tell you where they all are. They're in every house on the block with the exception of one. You just got to figure out which one that is. Why should people license dogs? What happens if they don't license dogs? What?
Well, it is a
A moment on
violation.
dog licensing.
It is a violation of the city ordinance. It's an infraction that they can be fined up to $72. The annual, the license they get is a lifetime license, so we encourage that, but the main reason we want license is if they get at large, then we can locate the owner immediately, or be able to track the dog to where it needs to be.
Other than a license, do people collar their dogs and put John Doe, this address, this phone number on them,
Like
Anyway?
she said, they microchip them.
and microchip them? Laurie, would more dogs licensed help you? Would more dogs licensed help the dogs? Would more dogs licensed help anybody?
Well,
All of the above.
sorry. More dog licensing isn't going to make a difference if the dog doesn't have the license on. And so that's the big hangup, is that we even have people who will come in and say, well, my dog is licensed, when they come to pick it up, because they think then they won't have to pay an impound fee. And we tell them, well, if your dog had your license on, number one, we could have called you. And number two, it doesn't matter. You still have to pay an impound fee. Your dog was still running at large. So I don't know. I mean, you could try a campaign. One of the previous animal control officers did a really great job of, once an animal got impounded, she would send a notification to them and told them they had to buy a license within 30 days. It did seem like there was an increase of purchasing at that point, but people think, oh, I'm going to live here for a year. I'm only here for school. I'm just going to go. So then what's the point of licensing my dog? Oh, my dog never gets out. So, I mean, it's a really hard thing to police.
So to speak. Thank you.
I also wanted to ask you about the donations of food. Are you receiving such things? And if somebody wanted to contribute some pet food, would you like dry can combination, and where could they bring that?
We do get donations of food from both Walmart and Winco. Rosar's when they have expired food, and Safeway is the same. The food that we receive for that is what we use for our food program. We actually, as a shelter, are part of the Science Diet in Shelter feeding program, and the reason why we went to doing that was because there simply wasn't enough of the appropriate food in the community for me to purchase to be able to supply the demand that I had at the shelter. So we joined that program. So all the food donations that come into the shelter that is from the local stores, we do use for the community feeding program. So if you're wanting to find something that specifically we need to use for inside the shelter, we recommend that you get canned food, because that is something that we don't get through the Science Diet program. And so canned dog and canned cat is both something that we use a lot of. So
Okay. And I know some of the area food banks are also accepting pet food
yes,
in their stores.
and yeah, and if they don't have food, we always encourage them to send people our direction as well.
Hmm.
So.
That's a terrific program.
We do it, I mean, it's hard because sometimes you run out and people are needing it, but we can only give what we have, so it's like every food bank, basically.
Okay. Well, I know we weren't necessarily expecting a report from the Friends of the Dog Park or that group, but I know these are integrally bound just because of their proximity to each other. The
They are.
facility for pet care and then also the dog park. Would you like to say something about it, or may I invite anybody who's here from Friends of the Dog Park to comment?
The only thing that I would like to say is that I love the fact that there's a dog park in Moscow. There definitely needs to be a dog park in Moscow. It shouldn't be next to the Humane Society. Even though we love seeing the alumni from the shelter go to the dog park, it's really hard because the dog park gets so busy that we actually had to get designated parking spots for the shelter because there was no place for people to park. And even though there is a leash ordinance, people come to the dog park and just let their dogs out of their car to run loose, to go into the dog park, which isn't exactly fair for the animals that are being walked that are from the shelter, because sometimes we do have dogs that aren't good with little dogs, or a dog that's not good with other dogs, and they shouldn't be isolated and not able to come out because somebody from the dog park's not following the rules. So unfortunately, even though I love the dog park, I've taken my own dogs there, but now that they're all senior, they don't play anymore. I mean, they love it, but it's just the choice of location is not ideal by any means. And people think that the Humane Society owns the dog park. So like on Saturday, for instance, somebody came over and was yelling at us because another dog played too rough with their dog, and now their dog's going to have to go to the vet, and who's going to pay for this bill? And we explained to them that it's not a shelter park and we're not here to police it, but they just they don't grab that concept. They don't understand, and so they think the Humane Society should be responsible for policing the dog park, and that is really difficult to get people to understand.
Would improved signage help make that clear?
I don't think.
Policing as far as leash regulations?
I mean,
leash.
following the leash law would be wonderful, but unfortunately, I mean, there's signs all over the place. I mean, the Parks and Rec put signs up that said, the dog park's closed from 7 to 9 on Wednesdays for mowing during the summer. I get to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, they're still mowing, and there's people just taking their dogs right into the park. It's just, it's, I know it's hard for them too, because they need to do their job, but it's just, so it is, like I said, it's a nice thing, but it's also a downfall. People dump animals in the dog park during the night. One of my employees lives past the shelter, and so at night when she's going home, if it's late, she stops just to check to make sure there are no animals that have been dumped in the park, because people do that. So it's hard. I mean, there are some benefits. Like I said, we love seeing our alumni there. It's great, but it would be better just space-wise if it was in a different location.
Okay. Well, I know that Sue Scott and I have been big advocates for at least a second dog park. You have anything to add, Sue, or you want to?
No. I'm just fascinated by how much you do. I'm just
Yeah.
very impressed.
And Friends of the Dog Park, anything that you'd like to add while you're here? Please come on up then. Dan, thanks. Thank you, Lori, and thank you, Chief.
Let's see, South Palouse River Drive.
Please tell us who you are, too, please.
Oh, sure. Dan Corden. I live at 611 Shoshone, and I'm the current president of the Friends of the Moscow Dog Park. And I didn't have anything too formally prepared, but I did just come up with a short list of positive aspects of having the park, unique challenges that the dog park does have relative to other parks, and then some potential opportunities that we have in keeping a dog park. I guess before I get started, I wanted to thank Lori because we've adopted a couple of cats that were part of your bottle-fed kitten program, and absolutely the most wonderful pets we've ever had. So thank you. So positive aspects. First, having a park that is run by the city, especially in a town our size, is just absolutely phenomenal. You know, Pullman has theirs, which is now, it's privately owned, I believe. And then we've gone all over the Northwest with our dogs. We visit dog parks all over the place, and it is usually much, much larger cities that have a dog park. So having our small community with a dog park is just a wonderful community asset. It's helpful in dog socializing with other dogs. So hopefully they'll, you know, I had a dog years and years ago before we had a dog park, and taking her on a walk was so difficult because every dog she met, she thought she had to protect the world from. And having a dog park, that same dog, after, you know, a couple of months of frequent visits, has no problem with meeting other dogs now on the street. So it's helpful in that. It's great for dogs socializing with humans. You know, dogs can be scared of strangers. That might lead to bitings and other things, whereas now if your dog is around in the park, it's meeting strangers all the time and realizing that actually they're just more people that love me, so life is good. But I think the biggest aspect that I love about it is people socializing with people. I think the dog park is one of the only parks in town that I know of that you go to the park and meet people that you don't know. You know, most of the time you call your friends and you say, let's meet at East City Park and play volleyball or whatever it is. In this one, we have mixes of people that wouldn't normally be together for whatever circumstances are. You know, students, deans of colleges, city employees, business owners, they're all there, and it's all kind of a level playing field. And you're meeting people that you may not even know who they are on the rest of the community, and then you'll meet them later and go, oh, hello, you're Romeo's owner. And I just think it's a fascinating way to increase the community bond. I think one other positive thing that we did recently, the last couple of years, we got a fundraising effort together and then partnered with the WSU Architecture Program, and we were able to put a little weather shelter in the dog park. It was pretty low dollar, but it's been extremely well used. Anytime it's windy, rainy, snowy, you get a large amount of people huddled underneath that structure. So that's been a great little winning project for our community. Some of the unique challenges of the dog park, we have, if we look at the city population as a whole, it's a small number of the city that might use the dog park, but it's a really high traffic area. So I think we looked years ago, but I think it was in the neighborhood of 100 to 250 people per day might visit the dog park. And it may be the same 50 people almost every day, or, you know, as it's scattered throughout there. So it's not a huge swath of a community, but in terms of usage, it is a really high usage park, especially for being about an acre. And that makes it really tough for things like maintaining the turf and the grass. And the Parks Department has done a tremendous job in trying to keep turf growing there nicely. And some of the difficulties, I think, this particular one, it's a fairly flat, and so we have pretty poor drainage. The water tends to just pool there. The soil doesn't penetrate water very well, and so if it does rain, the soil just kind of stays saturated for much longer than the rest. This location has, in the wintertime, the sun doesn't hit it very well, and so when we get snow compacts to ice, and then that spot will be covered in ice for, you know, weeks at a time when the rest of the city has kind of thawed out. And I think this is more of a user problem, but some of the users, I think, value the ability to use the park more than they value the quality of the grass at the park. So for instance, I think in years past we've tried fencing off areas. I think even long ago we even tried like putting a little, not a lock, but like a little latch on the door that says, you know, hey, it's too wet to come in today. And I think for the most part, most users just say, no, my dog needs to go to the park, and they come in and use the park. Some of the potential opportunities we have in the current park, like I mentioned, we did do the little weather shelter structure. At the moment, we don't have good disability access to the structure. So at both of the entrances, there's a nice paved pad as you first enter the park. And for the patrons who do have, whether it's a wheelchair or electric scooter or just walking with a cane, they tend to just stay on that little paved area because wandering into the park, especially when it's wet and muddy, is a liability that they don't want to take. So certainly one opportunity would be connecting the entrances to that little weather shelter facility in a way that would allow more people to access it. We've also talked about the idea of a French drain for a kiddie pool. Usually people bring in their donated, little tiny 8-foot or 6-foot children's plastic pools in the summer that the dogs like to play in. And that also creates a bit of a problem because the water gets dirty and people dump it out, and then it just, in the middle of summer, you end up with all these soggy spots of grass. And we had thought that having a French drain that was more of a particular place to put the pool, that then you could just dump the pool and have the water exit the park and maybe drain out into some runoff area would be an improvement. And then, of course, the one that's been talked about for a long time that we're all behind is the idea of doing either additional dog park or moving the dog park or something along those lines. It's some things getting good park land is always a difficulty, but the idea that a dog park could have a slope to it so it's not taking up what would be valuable ball field area is a possibility. Certainly something that had better sun exposure so that it kept the hillside or the park in general drier and melted off the snow would be great. And then our current park, while we're really lucky to have one, it's small for a lot of the large breeds. Whether it's greyhounds or whatever that might be, they're barely able to get up to speed before they have to put on the brakes because they've reached the end of the park. So they don't really get the exercise that they might need. So a park with a big enough space for a big dog to exercise would be great. And then also the larger space will reduce the amount of wear and tear on the turf, and so that alone might help solve some of the problems we've had there. And then I guess the last area has been done. A lot of parks, they will have, in a larger park area, they'll have an area more partitioned off. Either it's for small dogs versus large dogs. Some of them do it seasonally so that when it is winter and the ground is soggy, they'll switch back and forth from day to day or week to week to reduce the impact on the turf. But just having the space available to do that would certainly be a benefit.
Dan, are you familiar with any grant opportunities for ADA access to this park?
We looked at it, probably 2 years ago. We didn't find anything at that time, but that was just a pretty short, I think we only spent about a month of time looking at it.
If you find any, would you let us know?
Oh, absolutely,
please?
yes.
Thank you. Great. Walter?
Any thoughts about dogs off leash in the park?
In the park or on the way to the park?
In the park.
In the park it is a fenced park, and the idea is that they are off leash. This is one of the few places in town you can have your dog off leash. And in some cases, it's
I'm sorry, but I thought the earlier comment had to do with people having dogs off leash in the park.
in the parking lot.
The parking
yeah.
lot.
Yeah, and it is, just as Lori mentioned, the people come in and say, I'm only 10 feet away from the entrance, and they'll let the dog out, and the dog will see another dog and go crazy and run over and sniff and do all the things that they want to do, but it's a dog running wild, not that far from White Avenue, so that's certainly an issue. Yes.
So, Lori, we can't hear you from back there, so if you'd like to come back, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, we can hear you, but the people in TV land can't, so.
It's a very blind drive up to the shelter. Not only does it curve, but there's also bushes along the side, so if somebody lets their dog off leash in there and it starts to just meander wherever, it's an accident waiting to happen, basically, so, yeah. And the parking lot is the issue for the shelter, so.
They're okay off leash in the park.
Oh, they need to be off leash in the park. Actually, I think having the dog on leash in the park is a bad thing.
It's more of a liability.
It's a liability, yeah. It's funny how it works, but that's bad to have it on the leash in the park.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Thank you so much, everybody, for your reports. It's an eye-opener to know the resources we have and the possibilities ahead, so we appreciate that. We'll hopefully have our next leadership in the city and our city staff knowing that there'll be some budgetary implications come next budget cycle.